Hello, everyone. Welcome to our April BayICT Tech Talk. I'm Olivia Hereford, and I'm going to kick it off. We've got a really exciting topic here because we have just kicked off here in the Bay region a very exciting project. We call it AIDA, AIDA. And we are really looking at some really exciting opportunities for integrating AI and data analytics curriculum across our colleges in the region. And I'm kicking this off because I want to introduce Wendy Porter, who came on board about 3 or 4 months ago to help us out. We had so much going on, and this was a really important project, and we really wanted to dedicate someone to help us with the planning, engaging the colleges and our partners in pulling together this really exciting project, and you're going to hear a little bit about it today. So I want to introduce Wendy, who's going to be our guest moderator today. Wendy is a peer. She's worked for quite a while in the far north region here for the California community colleges. And she had a little bit of time in between her roles to help us out. And I'm so appreciative of the work that she's done to help us out. So Wendy, thank you so much. I just want to give you those props and turn it over to you to moderate the panel. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Olivia. It has been just a really great time putting this project together. We're so excited to bring more AI curriculum and data analytics curriculum to the Bay Area colleges. That's all good news for all of you students that are here today. And I'm really glad that you were able to make it. We have an amazing panel today. So I'm going to go ahead, I think, introduce them next. Olivia, do you have the slides going, or are you going to do that for me? Thank you. Yeah. So we're going to meet the panel, and then we have a series of questions where we're going to get to hear their answers and have a little bit of discussion. And then we have saved some time at the end for questions. You can also put questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll try to go back to those as we go through. So now to get to our amazing guests. First of all, I have to say, I don't know that many Wendys. And so this is really cool that I'm actually in a meeting with another Wendy, and we have Wendy Pfeiffer here with us. So, and she's got quite a sense of humor. So watch out for her.
Yeah, they
so Wendy Pfeiffer.
They ran it was the year that we were born.
Exactly. So Wendy is the CIO of Nutanix, and they do cloud infrastructure and solutions. It's a really amazing company. Check out their website. But really, looking at Wendy's career and what she's accomplished as a woman in tech it's just outstanding. So she's actually been on the top 100 women in tech list, and top 100 tech executives list, and top 50 most powerful women in tech. And she also received CEO of the Year. So she's a powerhouse. You're so lucky to hear from her today and hear her wisdom. When it comes to AI, she's very passionate about ethics and diversity in AI. And I believe that there's a AI for All, which is a project that she's involved with as well. So you might want to check that out. And we can put some of these links in the chat later for you. And a little secret about Wendy that we learned when she was at our winter conference in January or February. She also went to community colleges and put herself through college before she received her bachelor's. So that's really near and dear to our hearts because we work really hard to put these programs in place at the community colleges for all of you. So we're glad to have Wendy here. Thank you so much, Wendy. And Carlos Contreras is next. And Carlos is a senior director of AI at Intel. And he's had a 25-year career, successful career in tech and education. He's also really cares about a diverse and equitable workforce. And he looks to the community colleges and he sees them as an opportunity to reach a more diverse student population for AI education. So he's a partner of ours at Intel. We're really happy to have him. About 3 years ago, he helped start the AI for Workforce program, which is the Intel AI curriculum that we can put inside of our high schools and our community colleges. So we are starting to do that, working with them. And it's just a wealth of knowledge. It's really going to help get our programs off to a great start. So we're so happy to have Carlos working for us. And thank you so much for being here, Carlos. And then last but not least, we have Alex Kotran. And Alex is the co-founder and CEO of BayICT. And so we'll share the link for you as well. You'll be very interested in this because they target more of the K-12 space. And we're really looking to partner with him as we develop our programs at the community colleges so that we can have a full pathway for AI education. And what they really are trying to do is preparing students to thrive in the age of AI. So a couple of things he's passionate about are also ethical AI, as well as corporate social responsibility. And his goal is to broaden awareness of AI by sharing AI curriculum that can be used in any K-12 class. So artificial intelligence spans all industry sectors. And so creating that awareness and generating that interest early is really gonna grab and spark some interest for our students to go into that career path, because you can make a lot of money and there's so much need for it right now. So we're glad to have Alex here with us as well. So now we get to go into the fun. So Olivia, if you can take us to the next slide. So what we're going to do is go through a number of questions and let our panelists answer them. So all of us, many people who've been in their career for a while have taken quite a twisted path to get where they are. For example, for myself, I have a sociology and literature degree, and I've been in tech, working in tech for 28 years, starting at Hewlett-Packard in the Bay Area. So you just never know where it's going to go. So we want to hear a little bit about your story. So I'm going to ask Alex first. I'm going to call you on this one. How did you get to this point in your career and find your passion for AI?
Yes, I went to school in Ohio at Ohio State, and my initial interest was in politics. So I majored in the humanities. I studied political science and philosophy, and then I worked on the Obama campaign, and then went and worked for the Obama White House. Was working in healthcare and Obamacare and Ebola stuff. And then after the White House, I moved into the tech space. I went and worked for an AI company that was working in the clean tech world. And so I was in DC at the time. That company got acquired, and so I moved out to San Francisco. And when I was in San Francisco, I was working for a number of other tech companies that you've probably heard of, like Airbnb and Hewlett-Packard. And I just started learning more about artificial intelligence, something you hear about constantly when you're in the Bay Area. I had attended some conferences and talks, and I started reading some books. And the more I learned, the more I just got drawn into it. And my mom's a teacher, so I was at one point relaying sort of some of the stuff that I'd learned to my mom, and she commented that, it's too bad that my kids aren't learning about this. It seems so interesting. And that kind of like was this light bulb moment for me, where I realized that, for all of the talk about artificial intelligence, this was like 4 or 5 years ago, people outside of the technology sector aren't really learning about this. They're, my thesis was that most people are just learning about AI through pop culture and the movies, and that's not really an accurate depiction of how this technology is going to impact people. And so that was really the nexus of my nonprofit, the AI Education Project, which is really how do we design curriculum and content that really excites students to not just be more literate about how the technology impacts them and how to navigate, the new digital economy, but really how you make decisions about what you're going to do after you graduate. And those pathways look a lot different today than they did even 10 years ago. And so anyways, that's the work that we do. And I'll stop there.
That's awesome. I love hearing how, well, first of all, working on the Obama campaign, that's pretty awesome. And the fact that, you took what you were learning at your work and what her job is, and kind of merged those two into a dream of yours, which is, getting this awareness of AI down into the K-12. So that's awesome. I'm going to go ahead and ask Carlos next. What about you?
So my dad was I grew up in a border town called Nogales in the Arizona border, and my dad worked for Motorola, and they had a small semiconductor test facility. So I remember when I was about 7 years old, taking a tour with him and seeing a wafer for the first time. It was about this small, and so that was my exposure to my conductor manufacturing. And many years later, I ended up at going to school, getting an engineering degree, a business degree, and then working at Intel. And always at the back of my mind was, I got exposed to technology because of my parents, and I just grew up with a bunch of kids that didn't have the same opportunities I did. So I wanted to give back, and so in 10 years into Intel, I kind of made a right turn in my career and started working with our public affairs, our government affairs, our external programs around STEM education. So I worked a lot on K-12 education, science fair competitions, maker fairs, you name it. Did bunch of really cool stuff. Then I switched again and I started doing some public affairs work in Arizona, and we started testing autonomous vehicles. This is the first time that I saw AI work, and I had to talk to the city of Chandler and try to get permits and some basic understanding in terms of how these cars are going to look, because they look really weird, and we didn't want people shooting at the cars or the police.
And what year was that, Carlos? What year was that?
That
autonomous vehicles.
that was about 5 years ago.
Okay.
And so I worked on that for a couple of years, and just the more you started digging into it, the government issue, the government regulations, the societal impact, lots and lots of really interesting questions, and it kind of drew me into this space. So then I started doing government affairs for Intel around emerging technologies, and I remember Governor Newsom going to Stanford and giving a really powerful speech about AI, how promising the technology was, but also how disruptive it was for workers and for people to get reskilled. So I think out of that, we kind of looked at what we were doing internally. We were doing a lot of work in high schools in other countries, and we brought this content that you talked about, Wendy, to the US, targeting community colleges, because we really wanted to go after populations that may not be exposed to this technology, and workers that might want to go back to school and get reskilled. And so we've been working on that for a couple of years. We'll talk some more about it.
So does that mean that you were instrumental in actually creating your job to be the director?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's been my career at Intel. Is I've had a couple of jobs like that where there's really nice intercept of external need and internal need, and you just kind of start doing stuff. And as long as it's adding value to Intel and to our greater mission, then it's okay. That's why I've been at Intel for 25 years. Otherwise, I really have worked for like 6 different companies while I've been here.
Yeah, I hear you. Same thing at Hewlett Packard. So that's a really good message to our students. Aim for that. Aim to create your own job. I mean, it's pretty. You can do it, and you're smart, and follow your passion, and it'll happen. So, Wendy, what about you?
Wow. I have not taken a straight path in my career. Was thinking about, kind of from where I started to getting to the other side. There's all these, stepping stones across the creek. I can think of, 3 important ones. The first was my first real job. When I was growing up, when I was in high school, I loved sci-fi, and in the back of a sci-fi magazine, there was this contest you could enter. So I entered this contest. I didn't know at the time that it was for adults, not for kids. But it was to design cockpit displays of traffic information, CDTI, for NASA's space shuttle. They hadn't had their first space shuttle launch yet. And so I entered the contest and I won. And then they discovered I was a high school student, and my parents and teachers and everyone was up in arms. But I ended up getting assigned to work at NASA Ames Research Center on this project, CDTI project. And I can't say that it really went very far, but I got exposed to supercomputers, to these Cray computers, and to sort of large scale networks and large scale systems and large scale data. And I started realizing how this data was being used to do really amazing, awe-inspiring, science fiction-y things. And so it was very, very interesting, very exciting to me, and sort of changed my career trajectory. Also got me to pay attention a little bit more to math. I kind of thought math was this like frustrating pursuit, but here were people using math in interesting ways. Fast forward much later in my career, I had a job at Yahoo, and I was running production operations for Yahoo back in the day when they had about 300 million daily visitors to the websites, until they scaled to about 1 billion daily unique visitors to the website. So very large scale. And in the midst of that, we acquired a company, a stake in a company in China. And as part of acquiring that stake, the Chinese government had access to our data and our systems, and we ingested tons of data, and we would process that data and use some algorithms to determine people's interests and their behaviors and so on. And we gave the government access to that. They ended up finding out the identity of a dissident, and that dissident ended up being jailed and passing away in jail. And we were called to Congress, before Congress. And there was this guy, Senator Tom Lantos. He had been a prisoner of war, I think, in the Vietnam War. He was this very passionate guy, and we're there, testifying before Congress, terrifying. And he yells at us, and he says, you might be technology giants, but you're moral pygmies. You cannot have this great power without great responsibility. And, the rest of us can't understand it. So you're going to have to apply ethics to your capabilities. And so that sort of set me on a path of trying to understand what is possible with the data that we're ingesting into our systems, and how do we ethically handle that data and use that data to instrument the processes that we're needing to instrument. And then fast forward to my job today. So I've had a career as a chief information officer for a number of years. So I'm responsible for the technology that the company uses to run. And in the process of using that technology and running the business, all of those business operations, particularly those that are handled by technology, they create data and metadata from our operations. And we use that data these days to train machine learning and AI tools. Ultimately, what happened was we began to replace our physical operations with autonomous operations. And today we handle about 85 to 88% of all of the work that we do in the company fully autonomously. We're actually using AI tooling to do that. But in order to do that well, we need to understand that our main job with that technology is to enable a very, very diverse global employee population to be productive. And part of enabling that productivity is dealing with diversity of thinking, diversity of backgrounds and ages and languages and viewpoints and experience levels and so on, and applying that to how we use technology. And so there's sort of a mercenary driver for that. We want to be productive. And there's a human driver for that. We want to be ethical. Ultimately, that led to partnering with some other folks to start this Association for Inclusive Artificial Intelligence, making sure that the technology companies like mine are actually using diverse data sets and diverse teams to create these AI tools that others in the supply chain use. And I just saw a note about Tom Lantos and his experience, and someone in the note said that he was a Hungarian Holocaust survivor. And so I got that wrong. And, he was, I will tell you what, that conversation and that accusation changed my life and my viewpoint.
That's fascinating. I love the story of the contest and And wow, what a path to where you have gotten. It's great. And it's interesting to hear all of you have touched government at some time. That's really neat to know. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the second question. And as you know, well, maybe you don't know, but AI is definitely not exclusive to tech companies. So it's very pervasive throughout all industry sectors and all aspects of our daily lives. It exists everywhere our data lives, and it determines how we interact with the world. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask Carlos to answer the question, what do you think the socioeconomic impact is of AI and how ethics are involved?
I think Wendy gave a wonderful example of
Mhm.
why it's important. And it's important to have different views around the table in terms of who's developing the technology to make sure that, some biases are identified, and also to have some controls around the data set and what it looks like. And so I think, efforts to have technology be more inclusive and to bring people, these skills are very, very important. Even if you're not going to be the person that's going to be developing the technology, even as a user, to understand what what are the ethical implications of the technology, because as a society we have a lot of decisions to make about when we use this technology, when we don't use the technology, what are the kind of guardrails to put around it. So I think it's super important for not only folks that are going to be impacted by jobs, but the general public to start to get some awareness about what this technology can do. And I kind of see it in other parts around the world, like Singapore, for example, has asked Intel to come up with a very short training for citizens. It's called AI for Citizens, just exactly for this reason, in terms of just getting the population educated around, what are the types of different issues. And if we're not systematic about attacking this from a socioeconomic perspective, we're going to end up, I'm convinced, in the worse space than we are today. So we have to be very, very proactive in terms of attacking this.
That's great. And, we look forward to your leadership as we develop out curriculum. And I think you bring up a really good point that you need to take into consideration, the users of AI versus the developers of AI. So it's a really important distinction. So Wendy, how about you?
Yeah. So I want to touch on both of the socio and the economic. One of the largest, the most profound economic impacts in our society is the iPhone. It's changed the way we communicate, the way we collaborate, the way we do business, et cetera. I've had this iPhone, I've had some iPhone, many different ones over the last 10 years. And during the last 10 years, I have interacted with Siri. And also during the last 10 years, I've had a daughter named Holly. We spell her name Holly, like Christmas. And whenever I voice dictate to Siri and I say the word Holly, Siri spells Holly, Holi, like the Hindu holiday. Now, Siri and I have had a 10-year relationship. And in all that time, Siri has never learned that 99.99% of the time when I say the word Holly, I mean my daughter, Holly, not the Hindu holiday. The reason Siri's never learned that is because of the interaction design and interfaces that were built into this technology by those who created it. They were not looking for input from diverse voices of the users, of the customers like mine. They had a point of view, they had a theory, they came from a particular socioeconomic group, and they built a tooling that would work on, at the original days, a relatively lower powered platform that might not have the ability to ingest data in real time and process it and use it to tune the user experience. That's an example of a product that over time becomes more and more separate from certain groups of users who are wanting to use it. if you think about the dream for AI, for example, a self-driving car, where I can have a conversation with that car and I can ask it to take me somewhere, to help me to do an errand. And you think about the dream for someone who may be differently abled, maybe someone who is older and can no longer see well enough to drive, or someone who doesn't have the physical capacity to drive themselves. What freedom a self-driving car would have. But if that self-driving car can't, through its interaction design, understand the different cadences of maybe someone who speaks more slowly, who might be differently abled in terms of their speech, who might use idioms or have an accent that is not well understood, then essentially we create this new AI divide between those who are like the creators of the AI, who have the same mindset, worldview, context of those who created it, and those who are actually using it. Statistically, the vast majority of technology creators are male, and they're from 2 or 3 ethnic groups, and most of them under age 40. And so, if you think that the creation is really a reflection of the creator, then you see that we need to create more diverse teams of creators in order to create more diverse products and technologies. And we need to focus on creating better product designs as well, so that those designs flex and move with how society works and how the users use them, et cetera. It is sometimes more expensive. It takes longer to have those inputs. It is difficult to attract a diverse workforce and have a global team. It is complex to build tools that have interactive interaction designs that can take on board that data and metadata from interactions. It's not as cost efficient. It's not necessarily as expedient, but ultimately, unless we are going to create more and more digital divides, or even more realistically, look at this, I no longer voice dictate when I want to talk about something related to my daughter, Holly. And so if in fact Siri's interaction design were to change, then I would no longer be providing that input into the system. So there's lots of opportunity for us to actually make this change. One of my favorite things is a website from the folks from Mosaic. It's called something like Different Voices or Diverse Voices, and it has pre-available text, pages of text, and it encourages people with every age, every accent, every language to read that text into a recording device, so that different voices can actually fuel these natural language processing algorithms.
I love your answer. It's I love your perspective on that. It's just so important. I've been reading so much on it, and I heard something in the news today that Generation Z is going to help us get to this. So we'll see how that goes.
I think they insist on it because they're these digital natives, right? So they're at their core, they're digital native, they're identity neutral. They're not going to be sort of behaviorally pegged by these systems, and therefore the systems will have to be more adaptive to accommodate them.
So wonderful. Okay, Alex, what about you?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to think about socioeconomic impact. So one of them and ethics. So one of them that I think needs to be drilled on is probably the most relevant to students is just the impact on the workforce. There have been studies that found that as many as half of all jobs are vulnerable to automation, and it's not just blue collar jobs. White collar jobs are just as vulnerable. Lawyers are being replaced, accountants are being replaced. And it's not going to be that jobs are going to disappear en masse. There's going to be new jobs potentially that are created, new companies that form, that utilize the technology, but a lot is going to change. And whenever there's really big societal change, there are groups of people who are impacted significantly more than others. And people often will talk about, the Industrial Revolution and say, well, we got rid of horses and everybody ended up okay. And that was true, but what they miss is that actually during the process of industrialization, there were a lot of people who, lived through absolutely horrific conditions because they were, working in fields and then moved into factories, and they were working factories that were getting mechanized and dealing with a lot of, there were far fewer, protections for workers at the time. So we have to think about that. We have to think about what, what are we going to do to make sure that the transition is smooth and that we aren't leaving people behind? And that's where I think education is so important. But I think a lot of today's students are going to be the ones sort of figuring out the solutions to a lot of these issues in terms of people who are being displaced, and how do we make sure that there are opportunities to guide people who have been in careers that are, no longer relevant. How do we guide them back into the economy? And so that's a different play on ethics, but I think there's a huge ethical component to how do we actually responsibly transition our workforce. Another thing that I think is worth drilling down on is just, automated decision making is really where I think AI poses the biggest ethical challenges. There's, increasingly companies are leaning on artificial intelligence to do, more and more sophisticated things that previously were done by humans. And one of the things I read recently was the pace of AI conducted screening interviews has exploded ever since the pandemic. And so that means that, if you're applying for a job, there's a chance now that the first person you talk to isn't actually a person, it's that it's an artificial intelligence. And when we talk about things like algorithmic bias, I mean, that's how this plays out, is in these use cases where it's really easy to see how people can be, disparately impacted if the technology isn't designed right, or even if it's designed well, it could be applied in an improper way. And so, there's no silver bullet solution to this. You can create regulation, you can increase awareness, but I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing is making sure that we have a critical thinking among the people who are actually utilizing the technology, deploying the technology, and that goes beyond just an understanding of how the technology works, but an understanding of how it actually impacts people. And so that's why I think, my background is in the humanities, and I always say, like STEM is no longer just the realm of technologists. It's actually the realm of everybody. There's a lot of different dimensions to how you just decisions. There's a huge need for philosophers and humanists and sociologists and the crafting of these technologies.
Awesome. I like how you brought in our history and how you empower the students that they're going to be the ones solving this, because you are. So we're going to take a little break really quick, just for a minute. Olivia, if you go to the next slide, just in the chat to kind of wake you up. Let's see who's got some good examples of AI. And while we're waiting for you to input them, I have to say that I think my favorite is autocorrect for sure, and maps, and gaming too. So I play Elder Scrolls Online. Yep, I know, I'm a total geek. But the Terminator, Google Translate. Yep, help desk chat. Yeah, chatbots. Chappy, nice. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Even, for all of us who are kind of doing this work, it's everywhere. It's almost impossible to wrap your head around all of the different types of examples. TikTok, autocorrects, TikTok, iRobot. Yep, vehicles, RoboVac. Always wanted one of those. Okay, feel free to keep doing that. We're running a little behind, so I want to keep us moving. So let's get to the next question, and I'm going to ask Wendy to go first on this one. So, what are your thoughts on the perception of AI in the present and how that perception will change in the future?
Yeah, man, there's so much to talk about here. It would be fun to have the discussion around, our robot overlords taking over the world. Maybe something for the students to think about is how AI relates to the jobs of the present and the jobs of the future. I know that maybe 5 years ago in my teams, there was this perception that, if we started to adopt AI in our business, we use AI to fuel our human resources operations, our sales operations, our facilities, our legal team, our IT team, et cetera. The thought was that this AI and this automation is going to replace human beings. And, I think that's a very strongly held perception currently. And it hasn't been helped by some sort of famous movements that big companies have made. For example, Netflix famously, replaced all of their people, 400 people in their IT and services organization with this automated system, and then they ended up having to hire a bunch of people back and so on. So there's certainly the thought that routine rote work might be replaced by AI, but I think in the future what we're going to see is that AI is an enabler for more, effective human communication and collaboration. In my organization, we measure all of the work that we do. And one of the things that we've used machine learning tools for is tasks that we're not very effective at. So we look at all of the work that we do and we can bucket it into two categories: planned work and unplanned work. And planned work is the most efficient kind of work because we planned it out. Unplanned work is that stuff that happens that sort of derails you. And unplanned work also has a component of it that has to do with rework. So, let's say you tried to do something and then you delivered that thing and then it broke. It didn't work. It's like my favorite example of unplanned work is when you heat up something in the microwave, but you don't quite get it hot enough. But you don't notice that. So you go and you sit down and you cut into it and you try to eat it and, oh, shoot, it's not hot enough. And now you have to get another plate because some of the stuff on the plate shouldn't be heated, and you have to put it on another plate. And then you go back to the microwave and then you heat it for one more minute because essentially you didn't get it right the first time. And so in the lean programming space, we have this notion of defining FTR, first time right. What does it mean to get work done right the first time? And if we look at all the tasks that we do and we see those tasks that people can't get right the first time, maybe they're really routine. You could do it right 50 times in a row, but the 51st time you suck at it. Like the way that I knit, for example. Like I could do like a couple of rows and then it's just everything goes to heck in a handbasket. So often tasks where you start having to do a lot of rework and redo, those tasks are candidates to replace with machine learning or ultimately with AI. And the more that we replace those tasks that are causing rework, the more that we have capacity to do creative tasks, novel tasks, new things, inventive things. It turns out that people are better at doing those inventive, creative tasks. And we're also much better at collaboration with each other. We have this ability that the machine doesn't have to synergize, to make the result greater than the sum of its parts. And so as we free up human beings from the rework, and we instead focus the human beings on the tasks themselves. And I love that book, The Phoenix Project, by the way. As we do that, then we will see that AI, machine learning is helping us to be more effective at doing the things that we do well while freeing us from the things we don't do. In my organization, over the last 4 years, I've had zero churn. I haven't let people go. I haven't lost people. I've added headcount. And over that time period, we went from having 15% of our work completed autonomously to 85% of our work by volume completed autonomously. And so I think ultimately what we need in the future is more examples like that, more experience like that, people knowing what it means to have this augmented way of working that allows us to get more things right up front. Ultimately, if you're working in an environment where rework has been reduced, then everyone in that environment is more productive, more engaged, et cetera. So it's sort of the rising tide raises all ships.
That's great. Love it. Alex, what about you?
So I think there's actually this, I mean, I would say definitely when we ask most people about what comes to mind when they hear the words artificial intelligence, they think of pop culture. So they think of whether it's Black Mirror or Terminator or whatever movie they've watched most recently. And so that's obviously not really relevant to how AI is going to impact everybody on this call in our lifetimes, more likely than not. I mean, we're not going to be dealing with that type of artificial intelligence, but the impact is a lot more insidious. It's like small incremental changes that we may not notice immediately, but we'll sort of in total, in the same way that the internet, and I don't think everybody noticed the internet and the way that it was changing our lives in the moment, but looking back over the last 20 years, it's obviously one of the most profound things that's happened to society. AI is going to be the same way. I think we look back 20 years from now and the world is going to look completely different, but it's not going to be super obvious as it's happening. Something else that, I think is just, I think people's perception is going to, I worry that people are going to become increasingly dissatisfied with artificial intelligence, because as AI continues to change and displace workers, that people are going to be angry. They're going to be losing their jobs. They're going to have trouble finding new work. They're going to feel like they are being left behind. And generally when that happens to people, their reaction is to blame somebody or something. And so we need to work hard to sort of preempt that and make sure that people aren't becoming too cynical, because unfortunately, even if you're displaced by AI, the only solution for you is going to be to level up your education and go back and get a new credential and develop skills that are more needed in the economy. And so everybody's going to have to be leaning in and sort of embracing the opportunities that it's going to create. And to do that, you really can't have a cynical perspective. And so, yeah, that sort of brings everything back to education as sort of like the key lever there.
Good points, Alex. What about you, Carlos?
Well, I think there's kind of like a couple of big trends that we've seen over the last few years, right? And to Alex's point, I grew up without the internet, so I totally got the change. I didn't have to go to the library, write a research paper, and go through index cards and look up books and all that crap. Thank God. But the people love data. They love taking pictures. They love Twitter feeds. So the amount of data that people are generating and companies are generating and government is generating, it just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. And that, at the end of the day, that's really what feeds AI, right? In terms of it's really the data. And there are so many smart people at the university level and companies that are just doing like really breakthrough research around AI, better tools, newer tools, better, use of technology. The compute power is there, right? So, I mean, I think we've crossed that barrier, and now you're starting to see, trends like no code or low code tools, right? So folks that don't really need to code coming in and using the technology. This morning I saw an Intel white paper with the company we're working with, and it was a software package for an AI software package for radiologists, right? That takes the radiologist, the X-rays, and does the tagging of what the AI thinks are problem areas, and the radiologist checks it to make sure that it's okay, and that increases their productivity a lot, right? And probably lowers the error rate. But there's a human in the loop. To Alex's point, right? These jobs, some of them are going to disappear, but a lot of them are going to change in terms of it's going to be a new tool that you're going to have available for you to do your job. And that's just one example of it. So anything that has a picture, anything that's computer vision generated, the machines are getting really, really good at that. And so to Alex's point about some white collar jobs that might be impacted. The question about perceptions is super interesting because everything now is political, right? Everything, vaccines, masks, everything that we made, everything in this society political. So why aren't we going to think that this is going to be super political too? And so I think we're going to see lots of political turmoil around this technology because it does have it's going to have some bad examples, right, of misuse, and then it's going to have some negative impacts in terms of potential job shifts and things like that. And so I think on the perception piece, all we have to keep doing is just kind of presenting both sides of the equation, and hopefully, we get to the point where there's some rational discussion around some of these topics. But it just seems like as that we're kind of stuck in this loop right now from a politics perspective.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your answers, and I really, what resounds with me is the realization that AI is going to really free us up to be more innovative and more creative. So we will get there. It's just the transition is never the best or the most fun part of all of it. So what I want to do something a little different. We're running out of time and we have about 10 minutes left. So my last question for all of you, I'm not going to call you out, but I really want you to think about the audience of students and, what would be your advice, but I'm also going to ask them to start asking their questions or start thinking about questions. So let's make this a little bit more of an open dialogue, get some good ideas out to these students on what they should do or what you think they should do. So if you want to ask a question, feel free to just turn your camera on and jump on in, or you can put a question in the chat. And then while we're waiting for those questions to pop up, if you guys want to, Wendy, Carlos, and Alex, if you want to give your little tidbits of advice to the students on going into AI.
I think that in all of our careers, we are going to have multiple phases of our careers. I certainly have, and I think the pace of change is just accelerating. And so look, this is a really interesting space that applies across multiple different industries. There's a lack of skilled workers. There are tools that can help you along the way, like these low code and no code tools. But ultimately, we are redesigning how things work, how businesses work, how education works, how cars work and healthcare works. And so if you love sort of tinkering, if you love making things better, if you like math or science, or you like interaction design, there's something for everyone. And finally, if you're like me, I'm a gamer. And I connect to the sort of the logic of AI and machine learning, right? This ability to sort of put on these skins and show up differently, to have different identities in different areas of the, I don't know what we should call it, the multiverse, right? There's so much that is available to us to show up in multi-threaded ways. And over time, you're not going to be pegged into one career path because there's expansive need for these skills. So, get in on something new, get in on something that's changing industries and changing the world, and especially bring your diverse point of view.
Awesome. That's couldn't have been said better. So we do have a couple of questions. So the first one's from Ada. What is the immediate future of AI in terms of quantum computing? So any of you three, if you have an answer for that one.
I can share. Well, so first of all, I've been trying to avoid this. Okay. Two things, machine learning and AI. So today, the state of technology is what I'd call machine learning. Machines have the ability to be trained from our data sets and our algorithms and our metadata and so on. AI, sort of technically involves this leap, this ability to, create, for the machine to create novel outcomes from the machine learning process. We don't really have many examples of that in the real world because we lack the compute capability for the machine to actually operate at that level. So quantum computing, provides some potential, right? A better, faster brain for the AI. The problem is that the technology is very, very nascent, and there's some wonderful experiments that guys like Google are doing, et cetera. But I would say that's that'll be in your future. That'll be 10, 15, 20 years on before that sort of technology can be monetized. In the meantime, we're really kind of doing super performant machine learning work.
I was on mute, sorry. Okay, so another one from Eric. What do you think will be the first AI to really catch on and become popular and well integrated into society? And try to keep this answer short, you guys, because there are a couple of good education questions after that we definitely want to get to. But if any of you have an answer on that, what do you think will be the first AI to really catch on?
I think it's going to be healthcare, any type of healthcare, personalized medicine applications. Yep.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Wendy or Alex, do you agree with that, or do you have a different opinion?
I mean, a good way to think about like how can AI be used in general is AI is very good at prediction. So think of any problem where prediction can help solve that problem. Healthcare is a great example, right? If you can predict the chances of somebody needing a heart transplant or developing type 2 diabetes, you can design treatments for them. But it can also be used in marketing, it can be used in manufacturing, it can be used in transportation. You're literally, with a self-driving car, what it's literally doing is predicting how a human would respond to certain situations. It's not actually seeing the environment. It's collecting data from the environment and then making predictions on how human drivers would respond. And I would say it's actually used already around us. I mean, every app that you've used today probably in some way is incorporating artificial intelligence, especially if you're using social media. Most marketing today is being fine-tuned using machine learning. So chances are everybody on this call is probably interacted with AI without knowing it, even just today.
Awesome. I'm going to answer Joe's question. Joe, we have about 9 colleges participating in the AI program. Laney College is going to be leading it. I'm going to give you my email. And if you want to reach out to me, I can help you more with that. It's pretty exciting stuff. And there are a couple of classes that are already out there and available. And that kind of goes to this next question from JC. And, JC wants to know what would be good baseline classes or knowledge to get. Heuristics or human psychology. Those are the knowledge sets I've seen before. So how do you guys answer that question?
Math, 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 math.
Ooh.
Yeah, I agree with Wendy, but I think I also go back to Wendy's point earlier around how everything is going to change. So we're going to need some folks with humanities to be also very involved in design, implementation, and even get into developing this technology, because I think the barrier of entry is starting to drop.
Anyone else want to take
I would add entrepreneurship to that. So a lot of the tools that AI is going to be unlocking are tools that business owners can use, and it's going to make it easier than ever to start your own business. And so, everything that goes into that, right? Like actually business fundamentals, accounting, even just like learning how to use spreadsheets. But then also sort of the sort of back end methods of entrepreneurship, how it works, how you develop an idea, how to pitch a product. And those are things that AI will never be able to do properly or as good as we will. Things that require creative thinking, interpersonal communication.
Yeah, and Alex, you touch on that's what our businesses are looking for. They're looking for people who are continuous learners, who are creative, who know how to problem solve. And you get those skills by doing things. You need to go out there and do stuff. Like Wendy participated in that competition that she found in the back of a magazine. The more things that you do like that, the more skills you're going to gain that'll help you in this new developing workforce that is sort of unknown right now. So
I heard one more thing that I think is everyone can create this skill. I heard that one of the most valuable skills in the future of tech and AI will be storytelling, the ability to tell a cogent story from beginning to end, the process, the characters, the plot, the logic, and let the machine do the coding.
that's great. I am so thankful for all of you for participating and for everyone who came. Olivia, I'm going to hand it over to you to close out a little bit.
Great.
We're almost
Thank
at the
you.
7 o'clock. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I just want to acknowledge that we have Tuan from Laney here, and he's also verifying that Wendy has just been a great go-to for this entire program. So if you have any questions, please get in contact with Wendy. So let's just want to tell you a little bit more before we leave about next month's Tech Talk. There's some exciting stuff going on. This is another big project that we're working on here in the Bay Area. Is our we're again working in collaboration with Laney and a couple of the East Bay colleges. We are creating a virtual production academy, and which is pretty exciting. You know, think Mandalorian. So we're going to be talking about that side of our sector. So I definitely encourage you all to come hear about that too. We'll have a student speaker and some other exciting things around digital editing. So anyway, thank you so much everyone for joining. This has been an incredible talk, and I'm sure we're going to definitely leverage it as we go forward to share with those that are interested in our AIDA project. So again, I want to thank our panelists. This has been really, this could have been 2 hours of conversation. I wish we had more time, but I want to respect your time today, and thank you all for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.